Okay, so all right, so here's how this works. Yesterday I had my gears and stuff for the oil pump out, and I went ahead and did a bunch of measuring, right? You're supposed to set these gears so that they ride on the oil pump plate with a certain amount of clearance, right? So this goes up into the engine, and then this plate sits at the bottom. And these gears are supposed to ride along this plate. This is a replacement plate. Normally it rides right along the aluminum that is in the oil filter. So in this case, you want there to be a certain gap at the end of this. And that gap gets created by this little filter, or by this gasket. So, but the way the gears stick is they actually stick out from the oil pump housing by 4 thousandths. So, well, mine does by 4 thousandths. It's 0.004 inches. So it sits out from that. The gasket here, this guy, is 0.006 thick. So you take 4 and 6, and the difference when you subtract it comes out to 2 thou, which is the theoretical perfect amount of clearance for the end of this plate. So I didn't know how thick this gasket was, and there was nothing specifying on the website how thick it was. So since I work as a machinist, I have my micrometers, and I grabbed them from work today. They are not adjusted to the temperature that I have out here in the garage. It's currently 40 degrees outside. These are all calibrated. Almost all measuring equipment in the world is calibrated for 68 degrees. That is kind of the point there. And there's a correction figure that you use to account for thermal growth and thermal expansion and shrinkage based on temperature relative to 68 degrees. For what we're doing here, it's not that important. So we're just gonna go ahead and micrometer this gasket here. The old one was 6 thou, 0.006 of an inch. Hoping this one comes out the same way. Let's see here. Still scrolling down one sec. This one looks like it's about 6.5 thou. So if I go ahead, I take this mic and I go ahead and I put this piece of paper in between the two anvils here. I say paper, it's the gasket. This micrometer is spring loaded. So as I turn this thimble, right there's my spring tension, and it will actually be at the point where it's calibrated to be at. So if I lock this now, and I turn this around to you guys, you can see this little mark over here in the shoulder. This mark measures based on these graduations. So you can see 5, 0, so 0, 5, and the mark lines up right about with the 7. And there's more readings if you spin this around, but it's not that important that I read those, so we're not going to. But this one, in this case, this gasket is 7 thousandths, non-compressed, mind you. So when you put this whole plate together and you torque it down like you're supposed to, it'll actually compress slightly. So we should have enough clearance at the end of the gear set. Honestly, this is going to help out a lot with this guy here. And the reason being is if I grab the old oil pump, well, the way these Buicks work, the gears sit up into a housing and they ride along this, as I was talking about earlier. You can see these wear marks in here. Now, these wear marks are not They're not super deep, but they're deep enough that I kind of decided I probably should go ahead and install the wear pad. It doesn't take much. When you're talking about oil pressure, man, it doesn't take much extra clearance to make a problem like this. So here's hoping that some way, somehow, by actually measuring and using the correct gasket and everything else, that I have oil pressure. Because as it sits right now, the engine starts, and when it's cold, it's great. You know, it'll sit right where it should. But once the oil starts to warm up at all, it loses oil pressure. I mean, it's you're talking like 5 minutes of runtime, and the gauge just starts to slowly fall. And these engines are notorious for having bad oil pressure in them in the first place. So anyway, that's kind of the quick rundown of how to check your clearance. Well, not so much check, but the explanation of clearance on the oil pump on a early 50s to early 70s, late 70s Buick engine. Have a good one.